Nah, my brother's wedding was the most beautiful event I had ever helped plan. I know that sounds strange, to brag about something that broke me, but I did help plan it. I found the venue. I negotiated the catering contract. I spent 3 weekends driving 40 minutes each way to taste cake samples with my sister-in-law because my brother said he was swamped at work. I put $17,000 on my credit card because my parents said the family would pay me back once things settled down. Things never settled down, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Brooke. I'm 31 years old. I'm a senior project coordinator at a mid-sized logistics company in Columbus, Ohio, which sounds boring, but means I'm very good at organizing chaos and making sure everyone has what they need. I've been good at that my whole life, not just at work. At home, too. Since I was a teenager, being the responsible one felt less like a personality trait and more like a job title nobody actually gave me. I'm the oldest of three. My brother, who I'll call my brother, is 28. My sister is 25, and my parents are both retired, which in practice means my dad golfs 3 times a week, and my mom volunteers at their church and worries about what the neighbors think. They're not bad people. I want to say that clearly, but they raised my brother differently than they raised me. There's a word for it that took me years to say out loud: favoritism. My brother was the golden one, the son, the athlete, the one who could do no wrong. My sister coasted on being the baby. And I coasted on being useful. I paid for my own college, grants and loans and 2 part-time jobs. My brother got his tuition covered by my parents. Not all of it, but enough. When I asked once, just once, why the difference, my mom said I was more capable of figuring things out. I took that as a compliment for longer than I should have. After college, I built something. Slowly and unglamorously, the way most people actually build things. I got my apartment. I got my car paid off by 28. I started putting money into my 401k and the separate savings account I privately called my "nobody can touch this" fund. I was proud of it. I didn't talk about it much because in my family, doing well financially meant you became the person other people borrowed from. And borrow they did. It started small. A few hundred here for my sister's car repair. A loan to my parents when their hot water heater died the same month their property tax bill hit. My brother asking me to spot him for a security deposit when he moved in with his girlfriend, now his wife, because he'd just had a rough quarter. I gave it. I always gave it. Not because I was a pushover, or at least I didn't think I was. I gave it because I genuinely loved my family, and I thought that's what you did. You showed up. You helped. You figured it out. The wedding conversation started about 14 months before the actual date. My brother called me on a Tuesday night, which already felt significant because he almost never called. We mostly texted, if at all. He was excited. She had said yes. The date was set. And then, after about 4 minutes of genuine warmth, the conversation shifted. "We're thinking about Windermere Hall," he said. Windermere Hall is a historic event venue about 25 miles outside Columbus. Beautiful old property, restored barn, fairy lights everywhere. The kind of place people put on Pinterest boards for years before they can afford it. "That's gorgeous," I said. "It's a little outside our budget," he said. "But Mom and Dad really want us to have something special." I remember exactly where I was standing, in my kitchen, reheating leftover pasta, leaning against the counter. I remember the specific feeling in my chest, the one I'd learned to recognize over the years. The feeling that said, "Here it comes." "How much of a gap are you looking at?" I asked. He paused. "Maybe if everyone pitched in. The family." The family. In my family, the family pitching in had a fairly predictable distribution. My parents would contribute what they could, which wasn't nothing but also wasn't enough. My sister would offer enthusiastically, and then have some emergency that reduced her contribution to a card, and I would fill the gap, because I always filled the gap. I said I'd think about it. He said that meant the world to him. And then I spent the next 6 weeks being slowly pulled into the full gravitational orbit of planning a wedding I was not getting married at. I want to be specific about the money because it matters. I put down the deposit on Windermere Hall, $4,800, with the understanding that the family would reimburse me. I fronted the catering deposit when the caterer required payment ahead of the tasting, $20 to $100. I bought my sister-in-law's dress alterations as a gift. I bought my own bridesmaid dress. I rented a car twice to transport decorations because my brother's truck was in the shop. I covered the florist's second installment when my parents were late, $1,400. By the time the wedding was 4 months out, I had spent or fronted just over $17,000, roughly $6,000 of which had been reimbursed. $11,000. Gone. Still sitting on my card at 19.9% APR, which is a very specific number that I remember because I stared at it every time I logged into my account at midnight wondering what I was doing. And then came the seating chart conversation. My sister-in-law, I'll call her my sister-in-law, was a perfectly pleasant person who became a different person in the months before her wedding. Stressed, particular, easily overwhelmed. I understood that. Weddings are stressful, but she'd also started making it very clear, in the way people do without ever saying it directly, that she found me a little much, too organized, too present, too willing to point out when vendors were trying to upsell unnecessary additions. One Sunday afternoon, 3 months before the wedding, I drove out to my parents' house for a planning lunch. I'd been to 7 of these. I brought my folder. Yes, I kept a physical folder because that's the kind of person I am. And when I walked in, something was different. The energy was different. My mom looked at the table instead of at me. My sister was on her phone. My brother was standing by the window. My sister-in-law was the one who spoke first. "So we've been talking," she said, "and we're going to do a smaller inner circle for the head table, just immediate family." "Okay," I said, "that makes sense. Where am I seated?" A pause. A very specific pause that I've replayed probably 400 times since. "We're putting you at table 9, my brother said, with some of our friends from college." Table 9 was across the room. Table 9 was where you put acquaintances. Table 9 was not where you put the person who had spent the last year of her life making sure this event could actually happen. "I'm at table 9, I said. "Not a question. It's just, the head table has a specific look we're going for," my sister-in-law said. "Very intimate, just parents and siblings on both sides." "I'm a sibling," I said. "Right, but," she glanced at my brother. He looked at the window. "We're keeping it really tight. You understand." I understood. I understood completely. I just didn't say what I understood. I drove home that afternoon with my folder in the passenger seat and that specific feeling in my chest again. Except louder this time. Not hurt exactly. Something past hurt, the kind of quiet fury that doesn't make noise. I sat in my parking garage for a while before going upstairs. I did the math I had been avoiding. $11,000. 3 weekends of cake tastings. 7 planning lunches. 14 months of my organizational capacity given freely, enthusiastically, in good faith. Table 9. I called my mom that evening. I said calmly that I wanted to understand what was happening. She said I was making this about myself. She said the bride had her vision and I needed to respect it. She said, "You know how you can be sometimes, Brooke." I asked her what that meant. She couldn't say. She just repeated that I needed to be more supportive. I said goodnight. I hung up. I sat with it for a week. I went to work. I did my job. I came home. I sat with it some more. And then one Thursday night, I opened my laptop and I booked a trip. I used my travel rewards points. I have a lot of them, because I travel for work and I am meticulous about maximizing my points program. And I booked a flight to Charleston, South Carolina for the weekend of the wedding. 4 nights at a bed and breakfast in the historic district. Ghost tour. Low country cooking class. Long walks on the Battery. I'd wanted to go for years and kept putting it off. I booked it in about 20 minutes flat. Then I sent my brother a text. I said I had a conflict that weekend and wouldn't be able to make it to the wedding. I said I was sorry and I hoped they had a beautiful day. He called immediately. I let it go to voicemail. He texted. I read it and didn't respond. My mom called 3 times over the next 2 days. On the 3rd call, I answered and said, very clearly, that I had a prior commitment, that I wished them nothing but joy, and that I needed her to respect my decision. She said I was being childish. I said I loved her and I'd talk to her soon. I hung up. The week before the wedding was the hardest part. Not because I doubted myself. I didn't. Not really. But because I'd spent 31 years being the person who showed up, and not showing up felt genuinely physically uncomfortable. Like going a day without eating. I had to relearn in real time that loving people and accepting mistreatment are not the same thing. I flew to Charleston on a Friday morning. I had a window seat. I watched Columbus disappear under clouds, and I felt, for the first time in months, like I could breathe. Charleston in October is something. The air has this quality to it, warm but not heavy, with the smell of salt and old wood and something floral I still can't name. My bed and breakfast was run by a woman in her 60s who called everyone sweetheart and made the best biscuits I have ever eaten in my life. And I grew up in Ohio, so I know what a biscuit should taste like. I checked in, dropped my bag, and walked straight to the waterfront. I took pictures, not performatively. I just wanted to remember what it felt like. The water, the old houses, the way the light hit everything at 4 in the afternoon like the city was lit from inside. I posted one to my Instagram. A simple caption. First time here. Already never want to leave. A picture of the harbor with the old fort in the background. I forgot about it almost immediately and went to find somewhere to eat oysters. The wedding was on a Saturday. I took my cooking class Saturday morning and made shrimp and grits from scratch, which I was extremely proud of. I had a glass of white wine at lunch. I walked through the French Quarter neighborhood and went in and out of galleries. It was, genuinely, one of the nicest days I'd had in years. I did not think about Windermere Hall. I did not think about Table 9. I was present in Charleston, in a way I hadn't been present anywhere in a long time. What I didn't know was that back in Columbus, something was happening at my brother's wedding. I found out later, through my cousin, who I have always been close with and who had the presence of mind to text me in real time from the reception, that people kept asking about me, specifically my mother's side of the family, many of whom I'm close with and who knew I'd been involved in the planning. My aunt, who is famously direct, apparently asked my mother at the cocktail hour where I was. My mother said I had a conflict. My aunt said in front of several people, "A conflict?" Brooke planned half this wedding. My cousin told me the mood shifted after that. Not dramatically, but people knew. Families always know more than the people at the center of things think they know. And then someone saw my Instagram post. I don't know who saw it first. My cousin said by the time dinner was being served, people at multiple tables had seen it. The picture of Charleston Harbor, the caption. Someone had pulled it up at table 9 actually, which I find cosmically satisfying. The word spread the way words spread at weddings, which is very fast and with embellishment. By the speeches, several people had quietly asked my sister-in-law's mother if everything was okay between the families. My brother, I was told, gave a speech that thanked everyone who helped make this day possible without naming anyone specifically. His new wife cried during her vows, which I'm sure was genuine. The cake was the one I had spent 3 Saturdays selecting. The floral arrangements were the ones I'd spent 2 hours on the phone negotiating into budget. I was eating shrimp and grits in Charleston. The text started arriving around 10 that night, which was when the reception was winding down. My brother sent 4 in a row. The gist was that I had made his day about myself, and that posting on social media during his wedding was disrespectful and attention-seeking. I read them the way you read something that doesn't quite land, tilting your head slightly, waiting to feel more than you do. My sister-in-law sent a longer message. She said I had humiliated them in front of their guests, that people were talking, that I'd ruined the atmosphere. I noticed she didn't mention the $17,000 or the 14 months. I noticed that too. My dad sent one text. He said, "Call me when you're home safe." That was it. That was my dad. My mom called at 11:15. I was in bed with a book and a cup of tea and the windows open to the Charleston night air. I answered because I felt calm enough to. She was upset. Not yelling, my mom doesn't yell. But that particular controlled upset that is somehow worse than yelling. She said I needed to understand what I had done, that I had deliberately embarrassed the family, that my post had caused people to ask questions. What questions? I asked. About why you weren't there, about the family, about things that are private. "Mom," I said, "I posted a picture of a harbor. You know what you were doing." I thought about that for a moment. "You're right," I said. "I was enjoying myself. For the first time in about a year." She went quiet. "I spent 14 months helping plan that wedding," I said. "I put $11,000 on my credit card that hasn't been fully paid back. I drove 40 minutes each way to taste cake on 3 separate weekends. And they put me at table 9. Another silence. "I'm not asking for an apology tonight," I said. "I just wanted you to know that I know. And I think somewhere you know too." I said goodnight. I hung up. I finished my tea. I slept better than I had in months. The fallout unfolded over the following 2 weeks, in the way these things do. Not in one clean confrontation, but in a series of smaller moments. My brother sent a group text to the family thread saying I had chosen drama over celebration. My aunt replied to the whole thread asking if anyone was going to address the fact that I had largely financed the event. That was the text that ended the group thread because nobody responded and eventually someone muted it. My sister called me and, to her credit, actually listened. She said she hadn't realized how much I'd spent or how little had been paid back. I believed her. She offered to help me draft a message to my brother about reimbursement. I said I'd handle it, but I appreciated her. My brother and his wife sent a joint email about 2 weeks after the wedding. It was long and carefully worded and covered many things, but the main substance was that they felt I owed them an apology for creating a distraction on their wedding day. The email did not mention money. It did not mention Table 9. It characterized my Charleston trip as a calculated move designed to embarrass them. I read it twice. I forwarded it to myself in a separate folder I labeled for future reference. I did not reply. A few days after that, I called my bank and set up a formal payment request. Not a lawsuit, nothing dramatic. A certified letter laying out the outstanding balance with documentation of each transaction, dates, amounts, what they were for. I'd kept every receipt, because I am the kind of person who keeps every receipt. The letter stated clearly that I considered the balance a loan, not a gift, and I was requesting repayment within 90 days. My brother called me, furious, within 48 hours of receiving it. "You're seriously doing this?" he said. "Yes," I said. "On our wedding month, the wedding was 3 weeks ago," I said. "And I've been waiting on this money for 14 months. "We're family," he said. Something happened to me when he said that. Not anger exactly. Something cooler and more clarifying than anger. "You're right," I said. "We are. And when I help family, I expect to be treated like family. Not seated across the room from the people I spent a year helping." He hung up. My parents called separately over the next few days. My dad, on his call, asked me quietly what the total outstanding amount was. I told him. He said he was sorry. He didn't explain more than that. I don't know if he knew the full picture before that conversation. I think maybe he didn't, and maybe that was a failure of communication in my family that went back a long time. I accepted his apology because it seemed real. My mom is a more complicated story. She called twice before I picked up. When I did, she was calmer, and she said something that surprised me. She said she thought she'd relied on me too much over the years because I had always handled things so well. That it wasn't an excuse, but she wanted me to understand where it came from. I didn't say much. I listened. That conversation, more than any other, made me think that repair was possible somewhere down the line, if slowly. My brother's wife sent a Venmo request to my brother, which he forwarded to me for their honeymoon expenses. I am not joking. This happened in real life. I screenshotted it and sent it to my cousin, who said, quote, "Girl." That was the whole text. Just girl. The outstanding balance was eventually settled. Not all at once, but over about 3 months. My parents contributed a portion. My brother paid the rest in 3 installments without commenting on any of them. I accepted each payment with a simple, "Received, thank you." No editorializing. No "I told you so." I didn't have the energy for drama, and honestly, the money landing in my account was satisfaction enough. I still have my travel rewards points. I'm thinking about Seattle next. What I learned from all this, I can't fit into a clean lesson because real life doesn't do that. But I'll try. I learned that generosity without limits isn't generosity. It's self-erasure. With a smile, I learned that the people who benefit most from your reliability are sometimes the last ones to protect it. And I learned that booking a flight is, occasionally, one of the most powerful things a person can do. Not to prove a point, not to make a scene, just to say, I am still here. I still matter. My time and my money and my presence are worth something. And if you can't see that, I'll go somewhere that reminds me of it. Charleston reminded me of it. The light off the harbor at 4 in the afternoon, the ghost tour where I jumped twice and laughed both times, the biscuits at breakfast every morning before I walked out into that salt and flour air. I am not estranged from my family. I want to be honest about that, because I think the internet sometimes expects these stories to end in clean breaks, and mine didn't. But things are different now. My brother and I speak occasionally. Not like we used to, but not with the warmth we maybe never actually had. My sister-in-law and I are polite. My mom and I have real conversations, sometimes. My dad and I talk about the Buckeyes, which has always been true and, I think, will always be true. What's different is me. I don't fill the gaps anymore. When there's a financial shortfall in the family, I hear about it and I say, I'm sorry, that sounds really hard, and I do not open my credit card app. When I'm asked to take on a project, I decide first whether I actually want to, and then I decide. That sounds small. It is not small. It took me 31 years to do it, and I'm still practicing. But I'm getting better. And I make excellent shrimp and grits now, which feels like its own kind of win. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long. Not the Charleston trip. That decision came fast, almost instinctively, like my body knew before my brain caught up. I mean the years before that. The $17,000. The cake tastings. The florist calls. The planning lunches where I drove 40 minutes and sat in a room full of people who needed something from me. I wasn't naive. I knew what was happening. I think that's the part people don't talk about. Most of the time, the person being taken advantage of isn't blind to it. They just keep believing that eventually the scales will balance. That one day the people they love will look up and recognize what's been given. That the generosity will register as love returned. It doesn't work that way, and the reason it doesn't is simple. Even if it's hard to accept, people treat you according to the boundaries you've shown them exist. That's not cruelty. It's just how human beings calibrate. I had spent 31 years showing my family that there were no consequences for asking more of me, no line I wouldn't cross, no invoice I'd ever send. So they kept asking, and I kept saying yes, and everyone stayed comfortable. Everyone except me. What changed wasn't them. My brother didn't have some awakening. My sister-in-law didn't suddenly develop gratitude. What changed was that I stopped waiting for recognition that was never coming, and started asking myself a different question. Not when will they see what I've done, but what do I actually want my life to look like? Booking that flight to Charleston wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. I didn't sit down and think about how my Instagram post would ripple through the reception, how my aunt would say something at the cocktail hour, how people at table 9, the table they put me at, would pull up a picture of me at the harbor. None of that was planned. I just wanted 4 days of salt air and good food and the feeling of being somewhere I'd chosen entirely for myself. The consequences followed because they were already in motion. When you build a life of quiet service for people who never acknowledge the cost, and then you simply stop, the architecture collapses. Not because you did anything dramatic, because the thing that was holding it up walked out the door and went to South Carolina. That's what I keep coming back to. The courage wasn't in the confrontation. There wasn't really a confrontation. The courage was in the ordinary act of booking a flight, of saying, with no audience and no announcement, I matter enough to spend money on. My time is worth something. My presence is not a given. Brooke me. Me figured that out at 31. Late, maybe. But not too late. If you're carrying something similar right now, I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I'll say this. The moment I stopped trying to earn a seat at a table that was never going to hold space for me, I found out I didn't need that table at all. I found shrimp and grits in Charleston. I found a bed and breakfast owner who called me sweetheart and meant it. I found what it felt like to spend a Saturday doing exactly what I wanted, with nobody asking anything of me, and to feel, just feel, completely enough. That's the thing nobody warns you about. When you finally stop shrinking, you don't just get your dignity back. You get your appetite back. For travel. For stillness. For your own company. For a life that isn't organized entirely around other people's emergencies. I'm still practicing. I don't think it ever fully stops being practice. But I'm getting better at it, one boundary at a time,